I remember standing on the edge of that pier, metaphorically and literally, feeling like I had caught the only thing that mattered. I had this fish, this person, and for the first time in my life, the noise of the world just went silent. I didn't care about the more fish in the sea logic because, in my hands, I held the only one that felt like it had been swimming toward me my entire life. I remember the specific way she looked when she was tired, the way her presence felt like a safety net I didn't even know I needed. I remember the quiet Tuesday nights that felt more significant than any New Year's Eve, just because she was there. I had built my entire identity around being the guy who held onto that specific fish. I viewed myself through her eyes, and for a while, those eyes made me feel like I was enough. But then the line snapped. It wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow, agonizing fraying until the tension just gave away. I watched that fish slip back into the dark water, and I stayed there, staring at the ripples until my eyes burned. I felt like a failure. I felt like I had let the only thing that could ever define me swim away. And for a long time, I just sat on that pier, holding an empty rod and refusing to cast again. I thought that if I waited long enough, or if I became someone else, she'd swim back. I stayed in that grief like it was a physical room, pacing back and forth, replaying every word said and every word left unsaid, convinced that if I could just solve the puzzle, the ending would change. What I didn't realize then was that by sitting there, I was letting my soul freeze. I was becoming one of those tragic figures Mahmoud Darwish spoke about, the kind of person who stays in the same spot while the world keeps turning. I was obsessed with the idea that I wouldn't find anyone like her again. And the truth is, I haven't. But that's where the growth started. I had to realize that the one that got away didn't actually take my capacity to love with her. She just took the version of me that existed in that moment. I spent months and days going through the motions, my body moving through the gym, through work, through conversations, but my spirit was still back on that pier, shivering in the cold of what if. If I was a ghost haunting my own life, I'd see a car that looked like hers and my heart would skip a beat, only to drop into my stomach when I realized it was just a stranger. It's an exhausting way to live, looking for a ghost in every crowd. I had to learn that the more fish in the sea isn't a consolation prize. It's a terrifying, beautiful promise of expansion. I started to look at my grief not as a hole I was falling into, but as a horizon I had to trek toward. I started to realize that the ocean is vast, not so you can replace what you lost, but so you can discover who you are without it. There's a specific kind of pain in realizing that the person you do anything for is perfectly fine doing nothing with you. It forces a level of self-reflection that is brutal, but necessary. I had to get honest with myself. The version of her I was mourning wasn't even the person she had become. Like Darwish said, you won't ever find the same person twice, not even in the same person. If she walked back onto that pier today, she'd be a stranger wearing a familiar face, and I'd be a stranger trying to play a role that I've outgrown. We grow at different speeds, in different directions, and sometimes the most heartfelt thing you can do is acknowledge that the season has ended. That realization was my turning point. I stopped looking at the water for a reflection of my past and started looking at it as a gym for my soul. Every day I spent choosing to move forward, even when I didn't want to, was a rep. I started to lean into the discomfort of the empty space. I realized that my value wasn't tied to being her person, but to being my own person. I had to learn how to be alone without being lonely, to sit in the silence and realize that the silence wasn't empty. It was full of potential for who I was becoming. The fish getting away was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me to stop being a spectator of my own life and start being the captain of it. I want you to think about the weight you're carrying right now. We hold on to these memories like they're anchors keeping us safe, but they're actually anchors keeping us from the deep water where the real life happens. I remember the first morning I woke up and she wasn't the first thing on my mind. It felt like a betrayal at first, like I was losing her all over again. But then I realized it was actually freedom. It was my brain finally making room for me. If you're sitting where I was, clutching that empty line and feeling like the best part of your story is already over, I need you to hear me. You are unique, and what you had was unique. And that is exactly why you have to let it go. You cannot carry a monument into the deep sea. It'll only sink you. I had to learn to love the hunt again, not for another person, but for the next version of myself. I started chasing the versions of me that were stronger, more disciplined, and more at peace with the world. I found solace in the early morning runs, the heavy sets at the gym, the books that challenged my perspective, things that belong to only me. The more fish aren't just other people. They are endless opportunities for you to feel alive in ways you haven't discovered yet. I'm not the same guy who stood on that pier crying 3 years ago. I've swam through storms that the old me wouldn't have survived. And I've found islands of peace I didn't know existed. I've met people who have shown me parts of my soul that she never even touched. And the only reason I'm here now, talking to you, is because I've finally realized that the sea didn't take her away to punish me. It took her away to show me how deep I could actually dive. It took away the comfort so I could find strength. Don't let your soul freeze in the shallow water just because the one you wanted swam away. There is so much more out there, but you'll never see it if you're still trying to catch a ghost. You have to be brave enough to turn your back on the pier and swim toward the open ocean. Cast the line again. Not for her, not for a replacement, but for the person you're about to become. Because the truth is, the most important fish in that entire sea is you, and you're finally starting to realize just how deep you can go. Thank you for watching.